Lucas Grant stood in the dim light of his daughter's bedroom, one hand resting on the doorframe while Sophie's breathing finally settled into the rhythm of sleep. It had taken 3 stories and 2 glasses of water. But she was out. He pulled out his phone to text his old college buddy back, typing quickly in the dark. "I miss you too." He hit send without looking twice. Then his stomach dropped. The message hadn't gone to Marcus. It had gone to Victoria Hale, the CEO, his CEO. 3 seconds later, the notification appeared. Seen. No reply. Lucas stood frozen in the darkness, knowing tomorrow might be his last day at Whitmore Industries. The morning commute felt longer than usual. Lucas gripped the steering wheel of his 10-year-old Honda, replaying the moment over and over in his mind. How could he have been so careless? Victoria Hale wasn't just any executive. She was the woman who had turned a struggling tech firm into a billion-dollar enterprise in under 5 years. She was known for her precision, her composure, and her complete intolerance for anything that wasted her time. And he had sent her a text message saying he missed her. At 11:47 at night. From his personal phone. The parking garage beneath Whitmore Tower felt colder than usual as Lucas badged through the security gate. He nodded at the guard, trying to keep his expression neutral, but his mind was racing through every possible scenario. Would she report him to HR? Would she simply have him terminated without explanation? Or worse, would she say nothing at all and let him twist in the wind until he quit out of sheer humiliation? The elevator doors opened on the 14th floor, and Lucas stepped into the familiar hum of the facilities management department. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Keyboards clicked. Someone laughed near the coffee station. Everything looked normal, but Lucas felt like he was walking through a minefield. He settled into his desk and opened his laptop, but the words on the screen blurred together. All he could think about was that single word, seen. No reply, no acknowledgement, just silence. And in his experience, silence from someone in power was never a good sign. Around 10:30, Marcus from accounting wandered over with a raised eyebrow. "You hear about the executive floor this morning?" Lucas's heart seized. "What about it?" Marcus leaned against the cubicle wall, clearly enjoying the gossip. Victoria didn't come in. First time in like 2 years she's missed a morning meeting. People are saying she left some event early last night, and nobody's seen her since. Lucas felt the blood drain from his face. Was it because of him? Had his stupid text message somehow triggered something? He forced himself to shrug. Probably just a personal day. Marcus snorted. Victoria Hale doesn't take personal days. That woman lives in this building. He wandered off, leaving Lucas alone with his spiraling thoughts. At noon, his phone buzzed with an incoming video call. Sophie's face appeared on the screen, her gap-toothed smile bright against the backdrop of her after-school program. "Hi, Daddy. I made a turkey out of my hand today. Mrs. Patterson said it was the best one." Lucas managed a smile, stepping into an empty hallway for privacy. "That's amazing, sweetheart. I can't wait to see it." Sophie tilted her head, studying him through the screen with that uncanny perception children sometimes have. "Daddy, are you sad?" The question hit him harder than it should have. He was supposed to be the strong one, the provider, the man who had held everything together since Sophie's mother walked out 4 years ago. He couldn't afford to fall apart over a text message. "I'm just tired, baby girl." "Long day at work?" Sophie nodded solemnly. "When you're sad, you should eat ice cream. That's what Grandma says." Lucas laughed despite himself. Grandma's pretty smart. After they hung up, he stood in that empty hallway for a long moment, pressing his palm against his chest where anxiety had lodged itself like a stone. He had to hold it together. For Sophie, for everything they had built, but the silence from the executive floor was deafening, and every hour that passed without word felt like another nail in his coffin. The call came at 2:15. Lucas was elbow-deep in a maintenance request when his desk phone rang with an internal extension he didn't recognize. "Mr. Grant? This is Patricia. Miss Hale's executive assistant. She'd like to see you in conference room A on the 32nd floor. Immediately, please." The line went dead before he could respond. Lucas stared at the receiver in his hand, his mouth suddenly dry. The 32nd floor, the executive level, where facilities staff only went when something was broken or someone was about to be fired. The elevator ride felt endless. Lucas watched the numbers climb, his reflection pale and distorted in the polished steel doors. When they opened onto the executive floor, the change was immediate. Thick carpet muffled his footsteps. Abstract art lined the walls. The air smelled faintly of expensive coffee and fresh flowers. Patricia, a severe woman in her 50s with silver hair pulled tight, met him at the elevator. She said nothing, simply gesturing for him to follow. They walked past Victoria's corner office, its glass walls revealing an empty desk and a stunning view of the Chicago skyline. Conference room A was at the end of the hall. Patricia opened the door, ushered him inside, and closed it behind him without a word. The room was empty. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, gray clouds pressing low against the buildings. A long mahogany table dominated the space, surrounded by leather chairs that probably cost more than his monthly rent. Lucas stood near the door, uncertain whether to sit or stand or simply bolt for the exit. He pulled out his phone, desperate for any distraction, and that's when he saw it. A notification in his messages. Sent at 2:03 p.m. Forward entire conversation. His blood ran cold. Somehow, in his nervous fidgeting, he had forwarded his entire text history with Marcus. Every message, every late-night vent session, including the one from 3 weeks ago when Marcus had asked why Lucas always got quiet when Victoria's name came up. He scrolled frantically to the forwarded content, and there it was. His own words, sent directly to Victoria Hale. "I don't know, man. Victoria's impressive, obviously. Scary, smart. But sometimes when I see her in the hallway, she looks so tired. So alone. Like she's carrying the weight of this whole company by herself. I know it's stupid, but I wish I could just talk to her, like a normal person. Not as employee and CEO, just as two people who both seem to understand what it's like to be lonely." Lucas sank into one of the leather chairs, his legs no longer able to support him. It wasn't just a misdirected, "I miss you." She had read everything. Every honest, vulnerable thought he had ever expressed about her. He was finished. Not just fired. Destroyed. The door swung open with enough force to make Lucas jump. Victoria Hale stood in the doorway, her dark hair damp from rain, her usually immaculate blazer spotted with water droplets. She must have just come in from outside. Her expression was unreadable as she stepped into the room and let the door close softly behind her. Lucas scrambled to his feet. "Miss Hale, I can explain. The messages were never meant to go to you. It was an accident, a technical glitch, or maybe I hit the wrong button, and I completely understand if you need to terminate my employment. I just want you to know that I never intended any disrespect, and I would never presume to." Victoria held up one hand, and his flood of words stopped instantly. She studied him for a long moment, her green eyes searching his face with an intensity that made him feel completely exposed. Then she spoke, her voice quieter than he expected. "Are you afraid of me, Lucas?" The question caught him off guard. What?" She took a step closer, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor at the edge of the carpet. "Right now, in this moment, are you afraid of me? Or are you afraid of losing your job?" Lucas swallowed hard, forcing himself to meet her gaze. "Both. Honestly." Something flickered across her face. Not anger, not the cold dismissal he had expected. Something almost like recognition. She moved to the window, standing with her back to him as she looked out at the rain-streaked city below. "I read what you wrote. All of it. Lucas closed his eyes, waiting for the axe to fall. And I have to admit, I wasn't sure how to respond. She turned to face him. And for the first time since he had known her, Victoria Hale looked uncertain. Almost human. No one has ever described me as lonely before. At least not to my face. Or even behind my back, as far as I know. Her arms crossed over her chest, a defensive gesture that seemed completely at odds with her usual commanding presence. Most people are too busy trying to impress me or avoid me to notice anything at all. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. Lucas felt like he was standing on the edge of a cliff, unsure whether the next step would save him or send him plummeting. I shouldn't have written those things, he finally said. It was unprofessional. I was just venting to a friend, and I never imagined. Victoria shook her head slightly. Don't apologize for being honest. It's refreshing, even if the delivery was unconventional. She moved to one of the chairs and sat down, gesturing for him to do the same. Sit. Please. I'm not going to fire you, Lucas. I just want to understand. He lowered himself into the chair across from her, still half expecting this to be some elaborate trap. But Victoria's expression held no malice, only curiosity. And something else, something that looked almost like hope. You said I carry the weight of this company alone, she said softly. You're not wrong. But I'm curious how you noticed. We've barely spoken beyond the occasional elevator greeting. Lucas hesitated, weighing his words carefully. I work in facilities. I'm in and out of every floor, every department, every time zone sometimes. You see things when people think you're invisible. He paused, gathering courage. And I notice that you're always here. First one in, last one out. You eat lunch at your desk when you eat at all. You never leave for holidays until everyone else has gone home first. His voice softened despite himself. I recognize it because I used to be the same way, before Sophie. Before I learned that working yourself to death doesn't actually fix anything. Victoria's carefully composed expression cracked just slightly. She looked away, her jaw tightening. You have a daughter. Sophie, right? Lucas nodded, surprised she knew. She's 6. The best thing that ever happened to me. The corner of Victoria's mouth lifted in what might have been a smile. I've seen her picture on your desk. During the floor walkthroughs. She was quiet for a moment. I don't have children, never had time, never found the right person. And now, she trailed off, leaving the sentence unfinished. Lucas shifted in his seat, uncertain how they had arrived at this moment of strange intimacy. Can I ask you something? Victoria tilted her head. You've already told me I look lonely. I think we're past formalities. He almost smiled. Why am I here? Really? You could have had HR handle this. You could have fired me through an email and never thought about it again. Why the personal meeting? The question hung in the air. Victoria was silent for a long time, her fingers tracing idle patterns on the arm of her chair. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Because you saw me, not the CEO. Me. She looked up, meeting his eyes with startling directness. And I wanted to know if you meant it, or if it was just empty words. Lucas held her gaze, feeling something shift between them. I meant every word. Victoria stood abruptly, smoothing her blazer with practiced efficiency. The moment of vulnerability had passed, replaced by her usual professional armor. I have a board call in 10 minutes. We should probably end this here. Lucas rose as well, recognizing a dismissal when he heard one. But as he reached for the door handle, Victoria spoke again. Lucas. He turned back. She was standing by the window again, silhouetted against the gray sky. Thank you for saying what no one else would. He nodded once, unsure how to respond. Then he stepped out into the hallway and let the door close behind him, his heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with fear. The rain had stopped by the time Lucas reached the parking garage that evening. Sophie would be at his mother's house until 7, which meant he had 2 hours to decompress before putting on his dad face again. He was halfway to his car when he heard a small voice echo through the concrete structure. "Daddy!" He spun around to see Sophie running toward him, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. Behind her, his mother waved from her sedan. "She insisted," his mom called out. "Said she had to show you her turkey before it got wrinkled." Lucas knelt to catch Sophie in his arms, burying his face in her hair. "I thought I was picking you up at Grandma's." Sophie pulled back, her expression serious. Those words hit differently now. Lucas hugged her tighter. They were walking toward his car when Sophie suddenly stopped, her attention caught by something behind him. Lucas turned to see Victoria Hale emerging from the elevator, car keys in hand. She was out of her usual business attire, wearing dark jeans and a cream-colored sweater that made her look younger, softer, more approachable. She hadn't noticed them yet, her eyes fixed on her phone as she walked. Sophie tugged at Lucas's hand. "Daddy, is that the lady from your picture?" Lucas's brow furrowed. "What picture?" Sophie looked up at him with innocent eyes. "The one on your computer at home, the news picture you saved. You said she was very important." Lucas felt his face flush. He vaguely remembered saving an article about Whitmore's quarterly earnings, Victoria's professional headshot prominently featured. He hadn't realized Sophie had seen it, or remembered. Before he could respond, Sophie broke free from his grip and walked directly toward Victoria. "Excuse me, lady." Victoria looked up, startled to find a 6-year-old standing in front of her. Her eyes flicked to Lucas, who was frozen in mortified horror, then back to Sophie. "Hello there." Sophie beamed up at her. "You're the lady my daddy talks about, right? The one he says is really strong but looks sad sometimes?" The parking garage fell absolutely silent. Lucas wished the concrete floor would open up and swallow him whole. But Victoria didn't look angry. She crouched down to Sophie's level, bringing herself eye to eye with the little girl. "Your daddy said that about me?" Sophie nodded enthusiastically. "He says you're the most important person at his work, and that you work really, really hard, and that he wishes he could make you smile more." Victoria's composure cracked completely. For a moment, she looked like she might cry. Then she collected herself, offering Sophie a gentle smile. "Your daddy sounds like a very kind man." Sophie shrugged. "He's okay. He makes good pancakes." Lucas finally found his legs, closing the distance between them. "Sophie, sweetie, we should let Miss Hale get to her car. I'm sure she's very busy." Victoria straightened, but her eyes stayed on Sophie for another long moment before rising to meet Lucas's. "Actually, I'm not busy at all, for once." An awkward silence followed. The three of them stood in a loose triangle, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. Lucas with his hand on Sophie's shoulder, Victoria with her keys still dangling from her fingers, and Sophie, looking between them with the knowing expression of a child who understood far more than adults gave her credit for. "Well," Victoria said finally, her voice carrying a warmth Lucas had never heard before. "It was lovely to meet you, Sophie." Sophie waved. "Bye, sad lady. I hope you smile more." Victoria laughed, a genuine sound that echoed through the parking garage. "I'll work on it." She glanced at Lucas one more time, something unspoken passing between them, then turned and walked toward her car. 2 days passed without contact. Lucas threw himself into work, trying to convince himself that the conversation in the conference room had been a fluke, a strange moment of connection that would fade into professional distance. Then, on Thursday evening, an email appeared in his inbox. From Victoria Hale. Subject line, personnel discussion. The message was brief. "My office. 8 p.m. Lucas stared at the screen, his mind racing through possibilities. A personnel discussion at 8 p.m.? That was well past normal business hours. Long after the executive assistants had gone home. Long after witnesses would be around. He arrived at the 32nd floor at exactly 8 o'clock. The space was transformed in the evening light. Gone were the fluorescent overheads and bustling energy. Instead, warm lamplight spilled from Victoria's corner office, casting long shadows across the empty hallway. Lucas knocked on the glass door. "Come in." Her voice was softer than usual. He stepped inside and stopped short. The office had been arranged. 2 comfortable chairs had been pulled to face the window, angled toward each other. A small table between them held 2 steaming cups of what looked like hot cocoa, and Victoria sat in one of the chairs, her shoes kicked off, her feet tucked beneath her. She looked more relaxed than he had ever seen her. "Close the door, please." Lucas did as she asked, moving cautiously toward the empty chair. "This doesn't look like a personnel discussion." Victoria smiled slightly. "It isn't. I just couldn't think of another way to get you up here without raising questions." She gestured to the cocoa. "I remembered you mentioning Sophie likes hot chocolate. I assumed maybe you did too." Lucas lowered himself into the chair, wrapping his hands around the warm mug. "You remembered that?" Victoria shrugged, a surprisingly casual gesture. "I remember most things. It's a blessing and a curse." She was quiet for a moment, staring out at the city lights below. Then she turned to face him fully. "I've been thinking about what you wrote. About me seeming lonely." Lucas tensed, but she held up a hand. "I'm not upset. I'm just trying to understand. Why did it bother you? We're not friends. We've never had a real conversation before this week." It was a fair question. One Lucas had been asking himself since the whole mess began. He took a sip of cocoa, buying time to formulate an answer. "Because I know what it looks like," he finally said. "That particular kind of tired. The kind where you've convinced yourself that needing people is a weakness. That if you just work hard enough, you won't have time to notice that you're alone." He met her eyes. "I spent 3 years like that after my wife left. Working double shifts, taking every overtime slot I could get. Telling myself it was for Sophie, but really it was because I couldn't stand the silence in my apartment." Victoria's expression shifted, something raw and unguarded crossing her features. "And what changed?" Lucas smiled softly. "Sophie fell off a swing set while I was working late. Broke her arm. My mother called me from the emergency room, and I wasn't there." He shook his head at the memory. "That's when I realized that killing myself for money I didn't have time to spend wasn't protecting my daughter. It was abandoning her, just like her mother did. Just more slowly." The words hung in the air between them. Victoria was silent for a long moment, her fingers wrapped around her own mug, her gaze distant. "I don't have a Sophie," she finally said. "No one to fall off a swing set and shock me out of it." She laughed, but it was hollow. "I'm not even sure what I'm working for anymore. The company doesn't need me the way it used to. The board could run things fine without me. But this office," she looked around at the expensive furniture, the wall of accolades, the view that most people would envy. "This is all I have." Lucas set down his cocoa, leaning forward slightly. "That's not true." Victoria looked at him sharply. "You have tonight," he said simply. "You have this conversation. You have the fact that you reached out instead of pushing away." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "I know I'm nobody. Facilities guy. Single dad. Probably the last person you should be confiding in. But for what it's worth, I don't think you're as alone as you believe." The vulnerability on Victoria's face was almost painful to witness. She looked younger in this light, stripped of her armor. Just a woman in her early 40s who had given everything to her career and was only now realizing what it had cost her. "I was married once," she said quietly. "It lasted 4 years. He said I loved the company more than him." She smiled bitterly. "He wasn't wrong. But the company never disappointed me, never demanded things I couldn't give, never made me feel like I was failing at being human." She set down her mug, her hands clasped in her lap. "After the divorce, I told myself it was fine, that I was better off alone. But reading your messages." She trailed off. You called me lonely. And the worst part is that I couldn't even argue. The hour that followed was unlike anything Lucas had experienced. They talked about everything and nothing. About Sophie's latest obsession with dinosaurs, about Victoria's hidden passion for terrible reality television, about the pressure of being the only person in a room who couldn't afford to show weakness. Somewhere between the second cup of cocoa and the clock striking 10, the barriers between them had dissolved entirely. Victoria walked him to the elevator when it was time to leave. They stood in the empty hallway, the building silent around them. "Thank you for coming tonight," she said. "I know it was strange. I know this whole week has been strange." Lucas nodded. "Strange good or strange bad?" She considered the question. "Strange necessary, I think." A pause. "I haven't talked to anyone like this in years, maybe ever." The elevator arrived with a soft chime. Lucas stepped inside, then turned to face her. "Same time tomorrow?" He meant it as a joke, mostly. But Victoria's expression turned thoughtful. "I'll send you an email." The doors closed between them. 3 nights later, they found themselves on the glass-enclosed walkway that connected the 2 towers of the Whitmore complex. It was Victoria's favorite spot, she had confessed, a place where she could see the whole city spread out below while remaining hidden from view. The wind howled outside the glass walls, rattling the steel framework. Winter had arrived with a vengeance. And even inside the enclosed bridge, the cold seeped through. Victoria stood near the edge, her breath fogging slightly as she stared out at the distant lights. Lucas joined her, maintaining a careful distance. They had seen each other every evening that week, always under the guise of work discussions, always ending up somewhere far more personal. He was starting to lose track of where the professional ended and the private began. Victoria spoke without turning. "I've been CEO of this company for 12 years. I've given speeches to thousands of people, negotiated deals worth billions, been on the cover of magazines." She paused. "And I can count on one hand the number of people who have ever told me they missed me." Lucas shifted beside her. "What about family? Friends?" Victoria laughed softly. "My parents passed years ago. I have a brother in Seattle who I see at Christmas if schedules align." "Friends?" She shook her head. "I have colleagues, acquaintances, people who want things from me. But friends? Real ones? I'm not sure I remember what that feels like." The wind gusted particularly hard, making the glass panels creak. Lucas resisted the urge to step back. "That message I sent you by accident. I miss you. I meant it for someone else." Victoria turned to look at him. "I know." He met her gaze, his heart pounding. "But when I realized I had sent it to you instead, I wasn't just embarrassed, I was." He searched for the word, angry at myself, because part of me wished I had meant to send it to you all along. The confession hung in the air between them, more vulnerable than anything that had come before. Victoria's eyes searched his face, looking for something. Doubt, deception, self-interest. She found none. "No one has ever said they missed me," she whispered. "Not even my ex-husband, when things were good. Not even my parents, when they were alive. I was always the responsible one, the achiever, the one who didn't need anything from anyone." Her voice cracked slightly. "I've spent my whole life being strong, and I'm so tired, Lucas. I'm so tired of being alone." He reached for her hand before he could stop himself. Her fingers were cold against his palm. She didn't pull away. They stood there in the howling wind, 2 people who had somehow found each other in the most unexpected way, neither speaking, neither needing to. The accusations came on Monday. Lucas arrived at work to find his badge temporarily deactivated. Security escorted him to a conference room on the 15th floor, where 3 HR representatives sat with grim expressions. "Mr. Grant, we've received a formal complaint alleging inappropriate conduct toward a senior executive." The words hit him like a physical blow. "What? From who?" The HR director slid a folder across the table. The complaint was submitted anonymously. It alleges that you have been sending harassing messages to CEO Victoria Hale and manipulating your way into private meetings with her. Lucas's mind raced. Someone had seen them. Someone had noticed the evening visits, the closed-door conversations, the emails back and forth, and they had twisted it into something ugly. This is insane. I haven't harassed anyone. Victoria Miss Hale, she invited me to those meetings. Check her calendar. Check her email. The HR director's expression remained impassive. We're conducting a full investigation. In the meantime, you're being placed on administrative leave pending. The door burst open. Victoria Hale strode into the room with the force of a hurricane. She was dressed in full battle armor, a black power suit, her hair pulled back severely, her expression carved from ice. The HR representatives scrambled to their feet. Miss Hale, we didn't expect. Victoria cut them off with a raised hand. I understand there's a complaint about Lucas Grant. The HR director nodded nervously. Yes, ma'am. Harassment allegations. We were just explaining to Mr. Grant that Victoria's voice turned cold. There was no harassment. The room fell silent. Victoria moved to stand beside Lucas's chair, facing the panel of HR representatives like a general addressing troops who had disappointed her. I invited Mr. Grant to those meetings. Every single one. He never contacted me first. He never behaved inappropriately. And I will not stand by while an anonymous coward attempts to destroy a good man's reputation because they don't like seeing me talk to someone below my pay grade. The HR director shifted uncomfortably. Miss Hale, the complaint specifically mentions. Victoria leaned forward, her palms flat on the table. I don't care what the complaint mentions. I am telling you, as the person allegedly being harassed, that nothing inappropriate occurred. Furthermore, I consider Lucas Grant to be a valuable employee and a personal friend. If this complaint proceeds, I will provide a full statement to that effect, and I will be launching my own investigation into who submitted false accusations against a member of my staff. The silence stretched. The HR representatives exchanged uneasy glances. Finally, the director cleared her throat. We'll need to review the matter further. But, given your statement, Miss Hale, I think we can lift the administrative leave immediately. Victoria nodded sharply. See that you do. She turned to Lucas, her expression softening almost imperceptibly. They left the conference room together, Victoria's heels clicking against the tile floor. She didn't speak until they were alone in the elevator. Doors closed, ascending toward the executive floor. Are you okay? Lucas exhaled shakily. I don't know. I didn't see that coming. Victoria's jaw tightened. I did. The moment people started noticing our evening meetings, I knew someone would try to spin it into something sordid. This company runs on gossip and ladder climbing. I should have been more careful. The elevator stopped. Victoria pressed the button to hold the doors closed, turning to face him fully. I'm sorry, Lucas. I put you in that position. I was so focused on... She hesitated. On not being alone. I didn't think about what it could cost you. Lucas shook his head. It wasn't your fault. And I don't regret any of it. Not one conversation. Victoria studied him for a long moment. Then, slowly, she reached out and squeezed his hand. Neither do I. The afternoon sun was slanting through the windows when Victoria found him. Lucas was in the mechanical room on the 18th floor, elbow deep in the guts of a climate control unit that had been acting up all week. He heard her heels on the concrete floor and turned, surprised. Miss Hale? Is something wrong? Victoria glanced around, confirming they were alone. First, stop calling me Miss Hale. We're past that. Second, I need to tell you something, and I don't want anyone else to hear. She moved closer, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Could you lean down? I can't reach your ear in these heels. Lucas blinked, confused, but bent toward her. Victoria stepped close, her lips nearly brushing his ear. Her perfume surrounded him, something expensive and subtle, and then she whispered 3 words that stopped his heart. "I miss you too." He froze. The mechanical room hummed around them, but Lucas heard none of it. His entire world had narrowed to those 4 words and the woman who had spoken them. He straightened slowly, meeting her eyes. Victoria's usual composure was gone. In its place was something raw and terrified and hopeful all at once. "I know it's complicated," she said quickly. "I know there are 1,000 reasons why this is a terrible idea. Power dynamics and office politics, and the fact that I'm probably the worst candidate for any kind of relationship in this entire city. But I can't stop thinking about you, about our conversations, about the way you actually see me." She swallowed hard. "And I needed you to know. Even if you don't feel the same way, even if this ruins everything, I needed to say it out loud." Lucas stood motionless for what felt like an eternity. His mind was racing, but his heart had already made its decision long ago. "I feel the same way," he said quietly. "I've felt it since the first time you laughed at something I said, since the first time you talked about yourself like a real person instead of a job title, since Sophie told you that you looked sad and you actually listened." Victoria's breath caught. "Lucas." He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face with trembling fingers. "We'll figure out the complicated parts, the politics, the appearances, all of it. But not right now." He let his hand fall. "Right now, I just need you to know that you're not alone anymore. Neither of us are." The lobby of Whitmore Tower gleamed with polished marble and winter sunlight. Outside the massive glass doors, the first snow of the season had begun to fall, dusting the city in white. Lucas held Sophie's hand as they walked toward the exit, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. She had insisted on visiting his office after school, demanding to see where Daddy made the cold air come out of the walls. He was explaining the basics of HVAC systems when Sophie suddenly tugged at his hand. "Daddy, look, it's the lady." He followed her gaze to see Victoria descending the main staircase. She was dressed simply today, soft gray sweater, dark slacks, her hair loose around her shoulders. She spotted them and changed course, crossing the lobby with a smile that transformed her entire face. "Sophie! What a lovely surprise." Sophie beamed up at her. "I came to see Daddy's work. He fixes the breathing machines." Victoria laughed, crouching down to Sophie's level. "The breathing machines? That sounds very important." Sophie nodded seriously. "He keeps everyone comfortable. That's what he told me. It's his job to make sure nobody's too hot or too cold." Victoria's eyes lifted to meet Lucas's over Sophie's head. Something passed between them. An understanding, a promise. 1,000 unspoken words compressed into a single glance. "Your daddy is very good at making people comfortable," Victoria said softly. Sophie looked between them with the knowing expression of a child who understood far more than adults expected. "Miss Victoria?" The formal name made Victoria smile. "Yes, sweetie?" Sophie tilted her head. "Do you make my daddy happy?" The question hung in the air. Lucas held his breath. Victoria's smile softened into something private and true. She stood slowly, reaching out to rest her hand briefly on Lucas's arm. "I certainly hope so." They walked out together, the 3 of them, into the falling snow. Sophie skipped ahead, trying to catch snowflakes on her tongue. Lucas and Victoria followed at a slower pace, their shoulders almost touching. "She's wonderful," Victoria said quietly. "I can see why you work so hard for her." Lucas watched his daughter spin in circles, her laughter echoing off the buildings. "She's everything. The only reason I survived those first years after the divorce." He paused. "And now," Victoria looked at him. "Now?" He turned to face her, snowflakes catching in her dark hair. "Now, I'm starting to think maybe I was surviving instead of living. And maybe it's time for something different." Victoria's phone buzzed in her pocket. She ignored it. "I have a proposal," she said. "Not a work proposal. A personal one." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening." She took a breath, uncharacteristically nervous. "This weekend? If you're free. I was thinking maybe we could spend some time together. Outside of work, outside of everything." A pause. "I want to know you, Lucas. Really know you. Not as an employee, not as a confusing text message accident. Just as you." Sophie came running back, grabbing both their hands and trying to make them spin with her. Lucas laughed, letting himself be pulled into the impromptu dance. Over his daughter's head, he met Victoria's eyes. "More than you know." Victoria smiled, the kind of smile that reached her eyes and transformed her face into something luminous and young. As they stood there in the falling snow, three people who had each carried their own loneliness for far too long, something shifted. Not a dramatic change, not a fairy tale ending, just a small, quiet promise of possibility. Of warmth after a long winter, of connection after years of isolation. Lucas's phone buzzed. He pulled it out, half expecting a work emergency. Instead, he found a text from Victoria, sent moments ago while she stood right beside him. "Thank you for missing me. It changed everything." He looked up to find her watching him, snowflakes caught on her eyelashes. Sophie tugged at his coat, demanding attention, and Lucas Grant, single father, facilities manager, accidental text message sender, smiled at the two people in front of him and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Real, terrifying, wonderful hope. The snow continued to fall around them, blanketing the city in white. Somewhere inside Whitmore Tower, phones rang and meetings continued and the machinery of commerce hummed along. But out here, in the quiet space between snowflakes, three lonely hearts had found their way to each other. And that, Lucas thought, as he watched Sophie trying to teach Victoria how to catch snow on her tongue, was worth more than any job. Worth more than any title. Worth everything.